Okay. All right, let me see if that's the right screen to share here from the beginning. Aha. Are you all seeing that okay? Okay,
yes.
good. Okay. Zoom is not our forte. We use a lot of Teams where I'm from. So just a little bit about us. We're SHPA, or the Supportive Housing Providers Association, and we're a statewide membership organization. And our members are primarily comprised of nonprofit social service organizations and developers who are committed to ending homelessness and unnecessary institutionalization through supportive housing. When we say unnecessary institutionalization, that's for those folks that do kind of get stuck in justice-involved situations, but that's also unnecessary nursing home placement for those who voluntarily go into a nursing home, yet are able to live independently and are not allowed to leave the nursing home because they don't have a proper place to discharge to. So our membership really does, contain people throughout the state, and our focus is to end homelessness in Illinois. So the reason why I'm kind of speaking to you this evening, however, is because my program within SHPA is the Peer Leadership Development Program. And we host a workshop that's called Telling My Truth. So the workshop was designed by peers for peers. And when we say peers, those are persons who have experienced homelessness, unnecessary institutionalization, or are experiencing a permanent disability, because we know that those three factors can lead to homelessness very quickly for a myriad of reasons, right? The workshop was decided to be called Telling My Truth, because the word story kind of implies that somehow what you're saying may not be true, right? If you say, I'm going to share my story. But if you're sharing your truth, that lets somebody know right off the bat that what you're saying is factual to you, right? How you saw it. So I'm going to just share part of that program tonight with you, as it really can translate and pertain to all advocacy efforts. And I promise not to take up much of your time. At first I thought, I should probably do a different slideshow, but as I started looking at this, it really does translate when we're advocating for other persons and those persons that have disability that can't advocate for themselves. What we do is very, very closely aligned, right? So how do we share our truth, right? The truth of your experience helps to eliminate misperceptions. It removes the notion that somehow this disability or whatever we are advocating for, right, the situation was somehow your fault, or somehow the fault of the person that we're advocating for, right? Because we deal with so many societal stigmas. I'm getting ahead of myself with that one though. When you're sharing your story of truth, you're helping to override societal stigmas, and you can shed light on our systems and values for change. So I always say, you already know how to do it. I love this quote. If you've ever told the tale of your life more than once, then congratulations, you already know how to tell your story. Storytelling started before written word was ever created, right? Back in the day, that's how things were passed from generation to generation, was through storytelling. And I just really want to give you all some tips and tricks to get started with that. So your experience and what you're advocating for literally is your story of truth, right? As we've already established, but that is your advocacy, because, as a person with this lived experience, you have the knowledge and the solutions to propel truth into solution, dismantle those biases into facts, help others understand the barriers to what you're trying to accomplish. In this slide, we talk about leadership, but you have the skills needed to help shape policies and laws. And that's why we do advocacy, is to bring about the change that we really want and the change that we feel is needed. So I love this saying from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Literally, advocacy is the active support of an idea or cause. We do know it can take a wide variety, boy, I'm tongue-tied. It can take a wide array of forms, right? But what advocacy really is education. It includes basic education about the importance of an issue. So I always say, keep those statistics in your back pocket. You can't argue numbers. And that's one of the biggest advocacy pieces we use when talking with legislators, to advocate for more funding for persons that need assistance in housing. We call that permanent supportive housing, right? Whether that's a disability, mental health assistance is needed, physical skills needed. With permanent supportive housing, there's just never enough. So this slide talks a little bit about how to develop that story of truth, right? So where do we begin and how do we get started? I'm sure all of you have written papers for school, right? Sometimes when we do these workshops, we're dealing with folks who may not have had a college experience. And so we go over with, start with an outline. That's no different than trying to advocate for a person that we're trying to advocate for, right? Because we're going to have to pick out, can't tell the whole story because we wouldn't have enough time. So starting with an outline is always a good place to start. And you want to define the problem in this worksheet. So the first, and it might be the second, I don't remember if I had these in order, but the email that Lori shared with you all, there's a SOAR, S-O-A-R worksheet. And that's the one we're going to address just very quickly. And defining that problem is going to, what are you advocating for? I hate to call it a problem of sorts, but what is it that you're advocating for, right? So when we use this worksheet, I don't know if you can pull it up or maybe you've printed it off, but the acronym SOAR literally stands for, the S stands for set the scene, any obstacles that were encountered, what actions were taken, and then a resolution. So I'm going to switch the screen here. So this is the worksheet that I've kind of projected on the slide that you all got. So you want to talk about the who, what, where, all of the W's to describe, set the scene for your ask or for your advocacy effort, right? And you want to talk about the obstacles that you've encountered and the reason why you're seeking a solution, right? What actions have you tried? Maybe some things that you've noticed, especially when it comes to legislators, right? They don't always get it right on the first try. So they'll say, well, we gave you money for this, or we funded that. And you can say, yes, and we really appreciate that. However, it doesn't cover this particular population or this particular disability or, this particular reason why I'm talking to you. And when I say resolution, you may not have a resolution, right? You may have a proposed resolution as part of this. And that's why you're advocating, right? And that would take the place of that last bullet point to be really where you explain what's needed, right? Did you all have any questions so far? I know I'm kind of talkative this evening. Any questions?
It would be helpful, Susan, if you sort of gave us an example, maybe walk us through the 4 steps with an example.
Sure.
Maybe,
Well, and
maybe you could use a nursing home resident, somebody that had to go into a nursing home for rehab,
yes,
and then what
yes,
exactly they would do. So then
that
you would give that kind of an example.
that is really something that I run across in my line of work. So that's going to be a really good example for me to use. So, you know, you could literally, when you're telling your brief story, say, "Hi, my name is Jill Smith. Um, Back in 19 whatever, right? Set a year. I found myself with chronic disability that didn't allow myself to live at home because I didn't have family or caretakers. I decided that I would move into XYZ nursing home for rehabilitation, and it quickly became apparent that I would not be able to live on my own. Some of the obstacles I encountered was I could no longer walk unassisted, right? And then you could list some of the chronic problems that Jill faced. Some of the actions that were taken is, you know, I did physical therapy for over 18 months. I regained my ability to walk. I now have independent living skills. A good resolution to this problem is that I really just need an apartment in an assisted living community where I can live on my own, yet have the necessary help when needed. So this could be an advocacy piece where this person is literally asking, "Hey, I need to be discharged from here. I have no place to go. Can you be my advocate to help me get into assisted living? Because I no longer qualify for nursing home care, yet I don't have a place to go." Does that kind of help with
It gives us
some of
the
the,
idea, but
Very
as
much
far
so,
as,
yeah.
I don't know if everybody else here has children with disabilities, but I do, and we've run into that before, going into a nursing home and going through rehab and the whole thing. The problem is not that she doesn't have a physical place to return to. The problem is she doesn't have caretakers to help her. That's the problem. So
right?
is your advocacy for housing only, or do you also advocate for care, staff, whatever, caregivers, however you call them?
Well, we
No,
do advocate,
hey,
we do advocate for staff as well. Go ahead, Lori.
I was just,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So what Susan is doing is teaching us how to put together our story outline. So your issue would be that Susan gave. So she's not going to advocate for you. She is talking about how you, as a parent of a person with intellectual or developmental disability, can put together your advocacy truth, right? For when you're talking to legislators, local politicians, your peers, helping people in your community to understand. So she is talking to us tonight about how to create what you would say. So if workforce is the thing that is the largest issue, in your loved one receiving the services that you would need, that would be how you would target your truth.
Yes.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we always talk about making sure that you know your audience, right? So your story outline is handy to keep around, because you may be talking to a legislator one time and you may be talking to an actual facility, right? Trying to advocate for your loved one another time. So it's a flexible document. You can take this document and use it for a parent who's advocating for their child for a bully on the playground. I mean, there's just so many different ways that when you have, when you set the scene, you talk about the obstacles, what actions were taken, or what actions you could take, and what kind of a resolution you've achieved, or what kind of a resolution you would like to see, you can kind of morph that into almost any situation with, just basic problem solving skills. But it also keeps your mind focused, because if you're anything like us, we're very passionate advocates. And so sometimes passion, and the love for the person that you're advocating for can get you a little bit off track. So this helps keep you on track, right? We also have something called the elevator speech. And, that used to be an essential tool to getting a job, where you would actually find out who the hiring person was, and maybe you'd accidentally be in the elevator at the same time as them and say, hey, I'm applying for a job here or there. I think we've all done the elevator speech. Really, the only person that doesn't understand an elevator speech is about 35 to 40 or younger, right? Because they just that isn't part of the workforce anymore, but we're bringing it back, right? So I'll give you an example of my elevator speech. Again, like Lori said, I do a little bit, my line of work is just slightly different than what we're talking about this evening with you all, but this can be tailored to anyone. And so my basic elevator speech, which I had to use recently while I was in Springfield with a legislator, accidentally didn't even know he was on the elevator and said, so what do? I'm Senator so-and-so. And I thought, oh, now it's time for my elevator speech. So I just say, hello, my name is Susan Day. I work for SHPA. And then I explain the acronym, right? And I say, how homelessness is a statewide issue in Illinois? What we need is more permanent supportive housing to give the individuals the support they need to remain housed so that we can end homelessness in Illinois. So what I've done is I've described who I am, why I'm there. It doesn't even have to say who you work for. The second sheet that Lori emailed to you is an example of an elevator speech for both professional and personal use, is the sheet that we use. Because again, we all know that we do personal advocacy as well, right? So you just, again, want to state the problem, describe the change that you want, and point out the benefit. For us, that's a community benefit. For you, it might be the benefit of a loved one or a person, right? So there's two different examples on that elevator speech, but that's really designed to grab someone's attention, as you know, an elevator speech is, or to just keep things very brief, even more brief really than the SOAR acronym, right? The storytelling. The main thing is to be prepared. Because once you approach someone with that elevator speech, they're inevitably gonna want to know more information, right? So I always say be prepared. You want to keep the message simple, right? Know the core of your message, which you all do, I'm sure, if you're advocating for a loved one. Stay focused. Like I said, it's hard when you're very passionate about what you do. Have credible information ready with your personal experience. That's very credible, but statistics. Ever since I got into social work is my second career, right? I realized statistics are the best way to deal with a naysayer. Someone that says, well, we're not gonna give more funding for that. We already give funding for this. Those statistics don't lie. And it's really hard for people to argue with math, right? Especially those people that you can't tug on their heartstrings. Get to them with math, I always say. And then give people a reason to care, right? Sensory emotions, sensory information or emotions describe, and it's okay to say, I don't know if you've ever dealt with a situation like this, but what I'm feeling at the moment is, and let them know what you're feeling, right? It's okay for, as a parent with a child with a disability, I often had to tell doctors, look, I'm feeling really overwhelmed because we can't find an answer to what we're seeking, right? And so instead of accusing them that they weren't doing their jobs, I always told them how I felt. And usually that played on their empathy to try to find a solution or maybe try something different, right? It's the same thing when we're advocating with lawmakers, legislators, community people, anybody that you want to advocate with. So I hope that those tools help you. The elevator speech, I'm sure for some of you is a reminder of how we can take that from the business world and apply that into our advocacy effort. But if you just make sure that you have and give, keep that message simple, have that credible information ready, and give people a reason to care. I really feel like those are some really good tools for advocacy. We use them often, and we often have good success as well. So does anybody have any questions, or did you want me to back up to any slide or at this point?
So maybe Susan, people could practice
Yes.
and share a maybe if you go back to that even the people could practice what they're
Advocating for?
I think, Susan, I think this is very similar to the type of things that we've done in the past. Many of us on this call were in Advocates Network, and many of us have gone down to Springfield and we have testified, and we've also testified at the Kane County board meetings and in legislators' offices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have been all over the place, and this is very similar to what we have done in the past. And you have to keep it short and simple, and like you say, numbers. Going in with a graph is always very helpful.
Yes, the visualized numbers that you can't argue. That's a very, very good point.
Especially powerful when our personal stories are paired with those numbers, right? When you put a face like my son David or Gina, your daughter, when we put those personal stories with the statistics, because it's the stories that tug on people's heartstrings, I think.
Yes. Yes, for sure. A level of empathy really, really goes a long way, doesn't it?
especially when you talk about them being their constituents, right? To an elected official.
Yes, we have to remind often.
You're voters in your district, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So we have a variety of different people that have come in and out of this group, right? This family council here at AID, and we have people that have asked for this type of training and support because they have never done anything in terms of speaking to legislators and other local elected officials. And then we have people that have done, this for their entire children's lives, really, right? And have a variety of experiences. So that was part of the reason that we invited Susan as part of one of our educational tools sessions, right? Because we have the four pillars: advocacy, advisory, support, and education. So this kind of goes with both advocacy and education for people.
So I've got a question for you.
Sure.
What is what about follow-up? So back in the spring, I met with my state senator, and we talked. He seemed very receptive to my message. And obviously I follow up the next day with, hey, thank you for your time, blah, blah, blah. What is the best way to continue that follow up? And where is the balance between bugging the hell out of them and sort of it being a one-shot deal?
Well, I'll defer to Lori on that one because I know that that part of the advocacy piece, we do have a government affairs person that really walks that tightrope where I work more hands-on with the persons with lived experience. So Lori, I don't know if you have a guideline for your group with that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it a guideline. Am I freezing? It's saying I'm unstable. Internet is unstable. Maybe not me unstable, but saying maybe both. I don't know. But in my personal experience and opinion, I think that when it is your legislator, right, that you do elect, that it is not too much to meet ongoing, over the course of, once a month or ongoing, right? Especially if you're asking them to learn about complicated issues and you're going to bring them something different each time you come, because what you're really trying to do is create that personal relationship so that when it gets to crunch time, when they're doing the state budget, right? You can text them or call them and leave a message. Hey, remember all these meetings that we've talked about, the need for more direct support personnel, this funding level would allow that to happen or make it easier for us to hire people in order to meet my son's needs, right? My daughter's needs, my loved one's needs. So I think it's important to, if you're able to do that, you have time. I don't think, setting yourself a goal of once a month, even if you don't meet directly with them, maybe try to meet with them once a quarter and then once a month, send them, some information, right? A simple 1 page, of what the thing is to think about this month, right? We try to do that at AID for issues. We send out, kind of a once a month, kind of here's what's going on in the world, right, of Illinois and the world of IDD services and behavioral health services. So I think that's good. I mean, it's good to have, I have several legislators phone numbers, right? Their cell phone numbers. And when they're in crunch time and they are not answering emails and they are not talking to people on the phone, I can send them a text, right? And say, this is really important to the people of your district. This is what we've been talking about for the last 6 months, or whatever. And you don't get that number by meeting them once a year, right? Because they don't remember who you are if you don't build that relationship. That's my personal opinion. If you're able to do that, you only have one rep and one senator, so, whereas
Lori, actually, I think most of us have two because we have wherever we live, and then we have the one where
well, that's true. That's true.
live. So I take advantage of both.
That's
so.
true. Yeah. Well, AID has about 40. So we try to build relationships with all of them. Obviously, that doesn't work. So that's why it's exciting and important for you guys to have those relationships as well. Right. Yep, I agree. That is a good point that you have, and you could have multiple relationships. You could have family members that live in other areas that are even outside. I know one of the couples that sometimes participates in this group live in Chicago, right? And they're I believe sister and sister-in-law lives, out here in the burbs. So, they've got another contact that AID doesn't even have because we don't, serve a Chicago service area. So it's really valuable to continue to grow legislators, because they have a lot of stuff to try to know, I mean, like, this is not easy stuff, right? It's complicated, and they have to know about roads and sewers and unions and, legal stuff and services and policy, and it's a lot. So they need to be able to rely on the people in their district that are experts, and who is a better expert on your loved one than you and your loved one, right? So
Absolutely. And we have folks that share articles, that any excuse, if you will, to contact them and say, hey, this is what we just talked about. Here's an article that refers to this, and, to stay relevant. Much of what Lori said, we have some really strong advocates that, as they find information, they'll just include their legislator in on that email. So.
Well, and I think you also need to build up a relationship with the legislator staff, because they're not always the ones that are answering the phones or the emails. It's the staff that you deal with
Yes.
most of the time. But if you get to know them, they will pass it on.
that is very correct. They're the most accessible, actually, and are the easiest ones to create that relationship with.
Here's another question or thought that I have, Susan. As I think about advocacy, I think about sort of external advocacy. That's what we're talking about here, sort of advocacy with legislators and officials. I think for those of us who are parents with a child under the care of an agency, we also find ourselves doing a lot of internal advocacy, where we're advocating with staff at all levels for different or changes in the service array that is provided to our kid. So can you talk a little bit sort of about how the fact that within an agency, in some ways, there's more at stake, because we know the staff at all levels. We want to maintain good relationships, but we also want to be really vocal advocates for changes that we see need to be made, because we're in our children's lives in so many ways. So can you talk a little bit, sort of any insights you would have about internal advocacy?
Well, when we present this information to our group, we do have parents who have children with disabilities. We have parents that are new to advocacy, just advocating for their children within the school system, right? Because they're intimidated, and things like that. When you can really, again, just keep it simple and say, well, I'm James, I'm the father of, and, maybe they don't know you specifically, and say, well, I've been noticing that, this may be occurring, and wondering if we could do this, could I offer any help to get this done? I always say, be part of the solution, right? Say, what could I do to help you in this situation? And, maybe other people would benefit by that, right? So that's really just a short elevator speech all over again. Again, I always tell everybody, of course, we're going to keep it positive, right? And try to be part of the solution to, again, I hate to use the word problem, but there's, to the problem that you're trying to fix or advocate for, right? It's and you are 1000% correct. It's not always with legislators. A lot of people need to learn these advocacy skills just on the most basic level. And I always tell a lot of people, advocating for yourself sometimes is the hardest first step, right? So you have to learn to advocate for yourself before you can advocate for others. And I think, just primarily, basically, that's what you're talking about, because of course you don't want to sever relationships. when there's someone caring for your loved one, right? So that's a very fine line to walk, and a tightrope of some, essence there. I get that. Yeah. Do you have any other suggestions, Lori, maybe?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's very important for all of the people that we support, all of the families and everyone involved to do self-advocacy, local advocacy, state advocacy, federal advocacy, whatever is most of interest to you and importance, because some people could care less about talking to their state legislator or their federal person, but the most important thing is self-advocacy. But along with being a self-advocate, you also have to learn, right, about the realities of regulation and rule, and then figure out sometimes what seems like it is an internal choice sometimes is actually a state or federal choice, right, that we have to that providers have to comply with.
Combined, yeah.
So just being open and talking and listening, and both sides hearing is really important, I think, because no one is trying to not do a good job, right? But there are many unfortunately many barriers, particularly in the world that we live in today, with workforce and issues and challenges and funding complications, and then all the rules and regulations which they keep changing and updating, and it feels like every time they change them, that for what is supposed to be the better, there's always some adverse effect that comes from that as well, and trying to work through that as providers is challenging. So I don't think any well, at least here I can only speak for myself, but I don't ever consider anybody coming and talking to various levels of staff about what their desires and dreams are is not in any way confrontational or anything that shouldn't be done, right? I mean, that's what we work on doing, and people have to understand that our role as a provider is to the consumer, and parents don't always want the same things that their children want, right? And so that's a balance for us, right, as providers, because we have to serve the person and help that person have self-advocacy, right? So there is always a bit of maybe tension, but not tension in a negative way, but just like a wire is strong, all right, between all the connecting places, right? So but I do think it's vitally important to have ongoing conversations, because many of the things that constrain what families want to see for their loved ones, then have policy pushes, right, at the state and federal level that would allow more things to happen. So they all kind of go together as you're talking to the people that are providing the service and responsible for that. Then you can learn some of those things, so you can have it in your elevator speech, and you can have it in your advocate in your other advocacy arenas, right? So it's very important to have those dialogues ongoing.
Lori, from your experience over the years, sort of hearing families advocate within the agency for what they want, what are the sort of give us some positive advice and some things to avoid? I'm sure you've dealt with really confrontational parents, and I'm sure you've dealt with non-confrontational parents. So sort of give us some guidelines as we're thinking about internal advocacy. Anything else to say there?
Yeah, I'll try. I think that it's important to be realistic about the supports that your loved one needs, right? And to fully understand that and be aware of it, and continue to work with staff for workarounds on that, right? But to understand how that can then affect the ability to do some of the things that people wish to do, based on what is the best work for that person, right? And are you able to hire that workforce and get it in, and what are ways that you can work on that? I think coming at it with I want to understand what the barriers might be to doing this, right? And is it a internal barrier that doesn't need to be there, right? Is it something that is like, we have always done this way, right? Which I never like those answers, right? Where there's no reason, right, for it really, except for we haven't thought about it in a different way. But then sometimes there are reasons, right? And being able to understand those, you can then go, oh, this is again something that we need to advocate for on a state or higher level. So it's just really being, I think, respectful, and I think listening both sides, really listening to hear and understand, and asking questions, in ways that, people inside know all the rules and stuff back and forth, but then they aren't always maybe telling those, right, explaining this is not an arbitrary decision, right? This is based on some standard that we are expected to uphold by the funding source, right? Or we can't bill to pay for what it is that you want to do, or some of those things, right? And so just trying to ask those kinds of questions to get to what some of those things are, because I don't think staff, because it's internalized in them, so it's hard for them to then understand why you don't understand what they're saying, you know what I mean? So I think that just trying to ask those questions, and just I think giving us the benefit of the doubt that we are not intentionally trying to ruin your life, right? We are actually working all the time, endless hours. We have many staff people who are working 80 plus hours a week, right? So it's not like there aren't people that care, that aren't trying to do things, and so give us the benefit of the doubt that we are not intentionally keeping your loved one from doing something that you want them to do, but that there might be real reasons, there might be fear reasons, right? Our system is set up. Unfortunately, the DD system is set up to be, very paternalistic and caretaking, right? And staff know that if something happens, even if it's an accident, their employment is at risk, right? Their career is at risk. That's a very difficult thing then to ask staff to work through, and then take a risk, like going out into the community with a group of people, right, that you're worried about ensuring their safety, right? Because the more you're out of those confines of that 4 square walls of the Scylla, right, the more risk there is, whether or not you're doing everything perfectly, right? It's just, any of us, if we go out into the world, I was just on the highway today and I thought, good grief, it's incredibly dangerous to drive on the highway anymore, because people are flying, past me. I'm going 19 miles over the speed limit on the highway, and people are flying past me like I'm sitting still. And it's not like there's not other cars around us. So it's so the world is, people walk into stores and shoot people, right? So there is such little ability to ensure safety that, I think we forget sometimes. I forget all the time because that a direct service staff, that a queue, that a manager totally understands how quickly their career can be over with if OIG, decides something against you, and then you can't get a job in your field of expertise again, even if it is something that is beyond your control. This happens more often than you would wish, right? I think we forget. I know I do, because I'm always like, okay, we're rolling the dice and I'm going to stand behind everybody, right, and support, and we'll argue to the ends of the earth, that we are giving people opportunity, right, to be integrated, to live in places that are not always the standard, place for a person with intellectual and developmental disability, to get people out in the community, to make sure that we are supporting people that have challenging supports that are needed, and I'm always like, okay, that's our job, that's what risk we're supposed to take, but the system will not support us, like the IDD system. And Jim, as a board member, you should probably be scared of me saying this, but I feel like it's our job to keep pushing that envelope. And I will, like I said, if anything, whatever happened from that, I would definitely be loud and out there, in people's faces about it, in support of doing, what we need to do. But the system is not set up to support that risk taking, right? If you will, if risk is, I'm unstable again. Risk is, a part of it. I don't know. It's complicated, and I very much forget. Anyway, I'm starting to preach. I'm sorry. But I think that, yeah, I just think mutual respect, asking lots of questions that don't feel attacking, that are just, well, can you clarify for that to me? Is that, based on a regulation or a rule or a standard at AID, or is this best practice? Just help me to understand, what the processes are and how we might be able to change those, right? And also patient. I know that people, I know that, believe me, I want everything to be fixed yesterday, but it takes way longer than I want to when we go, oh, hey, here's the idea. So, you guys might remember several months ago when we talked about ideas about ways that we could better utilize, because we don't have a full workforce, right? The expertise of other people. So believe it or not, we are all the way through all of the surveys. We've surveyed, family members and board members. We've surveyed potential volunteers, and now we're just finishing up sending out the survey to staff about, because we surveyed first the consumers that we serve to see what they were interested in learning, doing, participating in, right? So, and then we ask family members and volunteers if they had any of those skills that they were willing to share, and got that. And now we're going the final beginning week of August, next week, we're gonna send it out then to staff to try to get some of the areas where we haven't had any family members or friends, right, that said that they were had those skills that people were looking to learn, and are looking towards, putting those into effect and having kind of the I don't know, I keep calling close to Aurora University, but whatever, the AID, college schedule, right, of different classes that people could take that are associated with this thing. So, we started talking about this as a family council when, I don't know, 4 months ago, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, I don't know. It seems like a long time. We're, slowly getting there, because this is all work that happens on top of, you know, everybody's day-to-day responsibilities as well. So I think a little bit of patience, because sometimes the process takes longer, especially as we try to be inclusive and gather information from all of the stakeholders and all of the potential people that want to see a change, and the people that might help make that change happen. And help us to know how you want to know things, because, like, you know, like, without me just saying that, you would never know that we had, you know, we're taking input from family council, right, and passing it along to people on staff who are then working towards, you know, ways to be able to implement those ideas. You know, let me know if there are ways to, you know, try to communicate that better to folks.
All good ideas. What other questions do you parents and guardians have?
Well, I don't know that's so much of a question, but Susan, I'd kind of go back to your elevator speech discussion there. You were absolutely right that we've done a lot of this in the business world, especially in sales training and things like that. And the sales trainers would tweak your last thing, your "so that community benefit," and rather end with "so that," and then state the benefit that the person that you are trying to convince with your elevator speech would personally get. So, for example, if I'm giving this elevator speech advocating for my child in a school, you know, "Hello, my name is Mike. I'm Amanda Bolero's father. You know how she really needs this blah, blah, blah service. Well, boy, if we could get that for her, she would become a shining example and you would look really, really amazing." So same kind of concept, but perhaps a little more Machiavellian in that we're actually trying to convince the person we're talking to how this really helps them personally. And I would imagine that would really apply when you're talking with the senator that you met in the elevator. Wow, if we could reduce homelessness by 10% under your term of service, how good is that going to look at re-election, you know, time?
Right,
So
right.
the community benefit's wonderful. Don't get me wrong,
point.
it's good to benefit the community, but if you really want to be effective, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's a tip I'm going to take back to the workshop. Absolutely.
Yeah. Straight out of the sales world. What can I say?
That was a good one, Mike. We always used to, like, I did a lot of advocacy, you know, for many years at the state capitol, and you tailored it for your audience, right? You know, so if I was going to talk to a Republican who is more fiscally conservative, I would talk about the financial benefits, right, of and the money that you saved out of emergency systems by you know, providing homeless services and ending homelessness, right? But if I, you know, was talking to a Democrat that was more liberal, I might talk about you know, social justice and you know, humanitarian things. So, you know, there in all of these things, if we know, like, or if you know what a legislator's pet you know, project is, many people have, you know, interests in specific types of policy or populations, right? And so that can always help you too, if you can, you know, kind of connect them together with that as well. So it's about just like sales is about knowing your audience, right? You know, not just pandering, but knowing what people you know, what people like, are interested in, you know, how to make that connection with them. Well, I don't see any other questions unless there is anybody else or any other discussion. I will thank Susan very much for joining us tonight and providing this thoughtful way to think about how to put your truths together in order to continue this important advocacy work. And there's no one better to do it than family and peers, right? Because that's what is going to get to the people in power the most. So thanks for joining tonight. I think in August, we are having a picnic, right? Jim, isn't that on our schedule next?
That's the plan. I was going to talk to you about that next week,
have-
and we will get that
Yeah.
in Aurora.
Yep. So we're going to do a picnic. So
Yes.
if we could think about meeting at 6 instead of 7 so that we could, hope I'm not frozen. My internet keeps being unstable. We will meet in Aurora at 6 p.m. We'll put I'll have Doug put out some more information, but we will have picnic items for dinner at 6 p.m. and you could feel free. We'll put out something so we can try to get an idea of how many people will attend, but absolutely feel free to bring your loved ones as well, right? And we will have a time of fellowship and fun and discussion and support for one of our support sessions, right? So looking forward to being able to do that, and hopefully it's not as hot as it is today and we could actually maybe be outside.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice. And if
Thanks,
anybody brings
everyone.
their dogs, Amanda would be thrilled. Just
Oh,
put it
that's
out there.
right. I know we have quite a few peers that would love to talk to you about your dog if you
That's for sure.
right now. All right. Thanks everyone so much.
All
Have a
right.
good end to your week and a nice weekend. Stay cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you as
Thanks
always.
again,
Appreciate it.
Susan, for your input tonight, Susan. That was good info. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.